everyone, and welcome back to the Screen Society podcast, a podcast that covers all things TV, movies, news, and so much more. We are here today to talk about the Pitt and season 2, episode 3, which originally aired on January 22nd, 2026 on HBO Max. The setting, the Pitt at the Pittsburgh Trauma Center, a chaotic third hour at 9 a.m., which is the title of this episode. And we have an hour that feels a lot heavier than its predecessors at 7 and 8 a.m. And we launch into this episode after a cliffhanger where we had a young boy coming in, not a young boy, young man coming in through the ambulance bay at the trauma center. And he was having quite an episode as he was having to be restrained to the gurney that they were bringing off of the ambulance. And we don't quite know what's going on. I think we assume leaving episode 2 that it might be mental state related, drug related, some kind of mental thing going on with this patient as he's unable to stay still, and he's really fighting to get out of the bed as he's coming out of the ambulance. Dr. Robbie had made the remark to Dr. Al Hashimi, can your process and data and everything else, can it handle things like this? And she looks at him like, oh yeah, this is a little bit different of a challenge than some of the methods that I've faced in my prior work. So welcome back to the podcast. I can't wait to talk about episode 3. We left on quite the cliffhanger heading into the next episode, which we typically do with the Pitt, and episode 3 is not really that different in the way that it kind of leaves you off heading into episode 4. But we have quite the episode to jump into. Let's get started. Robbie and Al Hashimi start to find an actual groove as co-attendings in this episode. IMDb's episode description, I got to pull that back up because I went to the full cast and characters on this. The episode synopsis on IMDb is after a motorcycle collision, a husband and wife find themselves in the ER. Later, Robbie bonds with a Tree of Life survivor. And that's the description on IMDb. Director Uda Brisowitz is the director that worked on this, and she is known for her work as a director and cinematographer, known for The Wheel of Time, Stranger Things, Fellow Travelers, and The Wire. So she has worked on a lot of excellent shows, and I'm really excited that she got to direct this episode, because I felt like usually in the third or fourth episode of a season, you start to get a little bit more of the in-depth, a lot of interpersonal relationships. You get a lot of background information and more development of these characters and their character arcs. But this, again, these episodes just don't really seem to miss, at least for me. I know some people didn't enjoy this episode as much as the last two, but I really do feel like they progress our characters in a nice way here in episode 3 and gave us a lot to think about and consider, especially the relationships between Al Hashimi and Dr. Robbie, but also a lot of times the doctors and their patients in this episode. I think there are some really great character building moments. I think there is an introduction of a character that comes into the ER that has one of the top moments of the season, I think, so far. It was one of those scenes that, we'll get to it, but it was one that I really left this episode thinking a lot about, just because I'm like, how would anybody handle this situation? And I just don't think there's a clear-cut answer. So we'll get to that scene. It's a really great scene. But overall, I thought, just my overall reactions of this episode, I thought it was really good. Another great episode by the Pitt writers, directors. Noah Wiley's really good in this episode as he starts to take more of the brunt work. I think he wrote on this episode as well as Valerie Chu and Mel Herbert. Let's get into it. We're not really going to go, we'll kind of go scene by scene, but really I want to get started by talking about kind of how the characters progress. I think the easiest way to really do this is talk about scene by scene. But again, I start to leak into other scenes as I go through this, and I always have it. I have it up on my iPad over here, just kind of watching through, because I like to watch through these episodes as I'm recording this podcast, because it gives me better direction on the scene by scene, because it's really hard to kind of find scene by scene breakdowns unless you really sit there and take a ton of notes. I do take a lot of notes, but it's hard to follow scene by scene. So got it up over here on the iPad, and that first scene is jumping back into when our characters are bringing a young male into the trauma center, and he is having a very hard time standing still. He's in restraints. The ambulance drivers, along with the rest of the crew, pretty much in the pit. Dr. Mel's in there. I think Santo, or not Dr. Mel. I think Moan comes in there at some point. Al Hashimi's, Javadi. Um, they're all in there trying to restrain this patient and give him the sedative that he needs in order to calm down. They finally get him sedated to a point where they're able to get him to stop thrashing around in his bed. And we leave that scene and head into our next one, which is going to be Dr. Langdon dealing with our ED patient from last time, our erectile dysfunction person who took too many ED pills and is finally, I guess, flaccid enough to leave the hospital. So he is leaving. Dr. Langdon's talking to him, and in that they pass the Hansons, who are the race car driving family, and they're a well-known race car family. And they go into the waiting room, and finally we get our interaction with our ASL sign language patient, and our nurse is, which I can't ever find her name. I'm going to see if I can try to locate her name in the full cast, just because we get a lot of her, and I don't know if we've ever really talked about her in depth. But she is at basically at the ER registration desk, and she finds an ASL speaking team member, staff member, to come out and talk to this patient who we assumed was deaf or hard of hearing, and finally we get the answer of the fact that she is indeed hard of hearing or deaf and needs an interpreter to be able to speak to her. They have been looking for her, and the staff member that comes out to talk from registration to her says that we've been looking for you. Here's an ASL sign language speaking staff member that'll help you throughout the process. She'll sit with you, and then we go away from her once again. I think we're going to have a big moment with her coming up in the episodes to come, but we're just not quite there yet. But again, it's a nice setup, and they do that really well with the pit. They show you into the waiting room of different patients that they did this last time with the guy that assaulted nurse Dana. And so again, they're doing it here in this episode. Dana then goes and sees our, we assume our homeless person that has gotten into the ER, Mr. Digby. And Mr. Digby is having some adverse reactions to different things that are given to him, but he is essentially getting better and on the mend. And Dana asks why Mr. Digby has waited so long to come into the ER. And he said that he just doesn't like doctors. He doesn't really trust the process. And Dana says that makes two of us, which is really a nice line from Dana, just because the charge nurses and the nurses in general are usually do bust the chops of the docs that they like. And you can tell this is a good culture here that Robbie has built and that Dana has built with her nurses, and the relationship between the doctors and nurses in the pit, which I'm assuming will become more and more. There's going to be more and more conflict that comes from these relationships. But right now, it's a lot of Dana just training her nurse that's following her around, Emma Nolan, and they're asking I keep doing that, Mr. Digby, which he goes, call me Digby. So I'm going to keep doing that because I keep calling people doctor that aren't doctors. He says, just call me Digby. And she goes, why don't you come in? Now that we've gotten you back to kind of a baseline and you're healthy, don't come and see us often if there's issues or anything like that. And she goes, it's just as easy as that. I don't know if that was like a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, because I mean, this person that has come in is obviously not in a house, probably in a shelter or living on the streets, so he doesn't really have a lot of access to care. And I don't know if she was tongue-in-cheek saying this, but she said basically like, we're here for you, that's why we're here. Typically, and there's like a right to there's you cannot refuse a patient basically in the ER. Once they come in, you treat them. And in this case, they do treat him, and obviously there would be medical bills and a lot of things attached to this. Obviously, he doesn't have the means to probably pay for those, and that's the assumption I think that we're making here. So when she says that, I don't know if she was saying it like kind of in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way where like it is very difficult for most people to pay any kind of hospital bills, let alone, jumping into this as a person that probably doesn't have the means to pay the medical bills after coming to the ER, because a visit to the ER is not cheap. So I don't know if that was meant for that, but I was a little confused by that writing. I was like, I don't know. Yes, the hospital is not going to refuse you, but also that care, that's not, this isn't, there's not free healthcare in this country. So that's what really confused me. Like if the person doesn't have means to pay, they're typically not, they're probably avoiding the ER, but if they do come to the ER, they're probably not paying up on the bills that they have. Then after that, she leaves the bedside and in walks a security guard. And our security guard is quite the character, is the way that I'll put that. Um, he is campus security guard Tony Chinchilio. I think that is how you say the last name. He's played by Curtis Bedford. And campus security guard Tony definitely gives off bad vibes. He walks in, he is there, there as he is approaching the nursing station, he is talking to them and says that he needs care, he needs some help because he is bleeding from his head. One of the nurses stops him before he gets to the actual nurse's station, and he basically, or nurse Jesse Van Horn is talking to him, and he says, "I'm campus security." He goes, Dana's like, "Yeah, I know what happened." He goes, "This happened at work, so I'm going to need documentation for workman's comp, obviously." He says that, he's got a laceration on his head, and he's got a blood going down his head, and they're going to patch him up, but um, they're going to get him all sorts of different exams to make sure that the head's okay and there's no internal bleeding or anything like that. But he's talking about the boy that they just brought in the ambulance, and he says that that young man threw a chair at me, and he's an animal, and you shouldn't let him out of that room. You can kind of see what the relationship is here between Dana and patients right now. I think because of where she has come from in the past season where she's been assaulted, she's much more hesitant, I think, with some patients, especially patients like this that seem very similar to the guy that attacked her outside of the ED last year. I think that you see her really hesitant to trust exactly what he is saying, and she kind of looks at him in a quizzical way, like kind of like, like what are you doing here? Like, yes, I know you're hurt, but like it feels like you have ulterior motives. And I think Dana sniffs it out pretty quick. And as somebody that was watching this right away, the patient that comes in, I think, is either African American or Hispanic. He's got darker skin. So this makes me think that the campus security guard might not be telling the truth completely about what's going on. We don't know anything after that, but, like, something gave me that feeling right away of, like, something's weird. Like, the way that he calls him an animal and stuff like that, like, and the way that he says he's very hostile, it gives racist. It definitely did, but you don't quite know yet because you don't get enough of the background. So I'm like, "That's kinda weird." That's like a red flag for me. Like, we see this quite often, right, where somebody of a darker skin color is attacked by somebody, and then they play it as, "Oh, well, this person's an animal. He attacked me." Um, Later, we get more details that make this a lot more interesting, and we'll discuss that once we get to it. Uh, the next scene is between Santos and our social worker. If you remember, Santos is dealing with a patient, a young girl that seems to have all sorts of bruising, new bruises, old bruises, but it's never quite healed. And there's concern that maybe she might be getting abused by somebody in the house, like whether it's a father or the father's girlfriend that brings her in. Um, there's a lot of concern there. And so our social worker is there along with Santos, and um, the discussion begins about, we need to wait till the father gets there in order to talk to him. The social worker does. In order to talk to him, Dylan needs to, who is our social worker, needs to talk and get an answer as to what's going on at home, because most social workers are trained to think through these instances rather than jump to conclusions. Santos, as we know in the past, has jumped to conclusions, and while her intuition has been pretty spot on every single time so far that we've seen in season one, season two, I think is going to be a humbling moment for Santos, and we do get answers as to what's happening to this young girl later on in the episode. But Santos and Dylan are having these discussions, and they're like, what's really happening? And Santos is like, it's 100% abuse, and Dylan's like, well, maybe we should wait before we jump to conclusions about what is actually happening. So then we get to the next part of the episode and the next scene, which is going to be Robbie and Al Hashimi standing in the room with our patient that has been sedated, who had thrown the chair at the security guard. Supposedly, they get called out by Dana because of an accident and an emergency that's coming in. They come out into the hallway, and that is when one of the bigger parts of this episode starts to happen. We get introduced to two characters that are going to be pretty relevant in this episode and all the things that are going on with them, and that is Mark and Nancy Yee, who are a married couple from a car accident. A motorcycle has hit them, and Mark, who is on the stretcher, is brought in, and his wife is standing next to him. She does not appear to have any kind of injuries or have suffered any kind of injuries during the accident. So she is supporting her husband, Mark, and she is, of course, very worried and has moments with Dr. Robbie and Al Hashimi coming up where she is pleading with them to save her husband's life, and that all this happened as a motorcycle ran into their car, and she's going through everything in her head, and then the initial prognosis right when they bring him into that trauma room, which is trauma room one. um, they come to the assumption by doing different tests and testing different things on his limbs and his extremities that he has either paralyzed or become paralyzed or having issues moving his legs and his arms, and not really reacting to any of the things that they're doing. So there is a lot of concern there that he has been permanently paralyzed. And the wife notices, and they start to talk about paralysis, and she goes, wait, do you mean he's paralyzed, like completely paralyzed? And she goes, and they're like, yeah, there is concern. Obviously we need to run tests, CT brain, and we need to figure out what's going on with the spine, and do everything that we can to figure out what exactly is going on with her husband, Mark. And so they start to run these tests and identify the different things that are going on, and come to find out eventually that yes, he is indeed dealing with paralysis, but we'll get to that. Then comes in the person on the bike, on the motorcycle. They bring him in, and he has a skull that's been fractured. You can actually, they peel back the bandages, and it peels out part of his head where you can see inside into the brain, which is disgusting. But again, very realistic. And they talk about the fact that he was not wearing a helmet on his motorcycle, and they start to talk with Robbie about it, because obviously we remember back on that first episode where it opens the season with Dr. Robbie riding in on his motorcycle without a helmet. He says, that he always wears a helmet, but then we flash forward to season 2, episode 3, and they start talking to Robbie, and he's like, hey, Robbie, don't you ride a bicycle or a motorcycle? And he says, yes, but I always wear my helmet, which is a complete lie. And I think Dana realizes that he's lying because she's seen his bike parked. She's like, nah, dude, I've never seen you have a helmet. Like, it's always attached to your back. I've never actually seen you wearing it. I think she seems to be wise to it. But then they walk out to the other room because they stabilize the patient with they're obviously going to have to do surgery on the patient's head that has the cracked skull and open skull. But it appears that they're going to be doing tests with him. So they go back to the other room where Mark is. And again, starts to crash. They can't quite figure out what exactly is going on with Mark. And so then it leaves that scene in the haste of them trying to figure out what's going on with Mr. Yee. And then we get Dr. McKay walking through the hospital with an older patient, Mr. Montrose. And Mr. Montrose is very good with words, an older guy, and is clearly flirting with Dr. McKay. Obviously, Dr. McKay is not interested like that, but she's, giving him a hard time, saying, you're a good looking guy, like older man, but like I've got no interest. And it's just kind of a cute banter back and forth between an older patient and somebody that he finds attractive in Dr. McKay. And then you have another patient yelling from another bed, really hitting on her. And they're around the same age where I can almost see that happening. But obviously, doctors dating patients, a lot of bad things there. And as she's interacting with Dr. Montrose, who calls her Hazel Eyes, which my wife and I both noticed she does not have hazel eyes. I think she has like green or like brown, not hazel. Like you can clear, or no, sorry, blue, but they're clearly not hazel. Uh, they start to, have this banter back and forth. And then as the guy is flirting with her from the other bed, that's when our nurse, I think it's Van Horn, who interrupts and says that they've got the test results back on Mr. Williams, who is the patient that Dr. McKay has been treating, who appeared to have issues with a wrist and a knee, and then he had a very hostile reaction to her trying to help him, and then would be very calm. And so she was like, I'm kind of worried that there's something going on mentally. So they run tests on his, I think it's a CT, or they run test, and they find a tumor that's a 4 centimeter tumor inside of his brain. So she starts to understand why he might be having these mood swings. And we then get a very short little scene with Dr. Whitaker and Ogilvy, and they go back in to see our boy Louis, who is still being drained, and he is talking about fireworks, and says, "You don't know fireworks, boy, unless you know." There's a guy, I forget who it is, but basically this person has been instrumental in making, which I didn't know this, but Pittsburgh, the firework capital of the U.S. or the world, and so. Maybe some foreshadowing there. I think maybe we're getting some foreshadowing that big fireworks and explosives might be a big part of this end of shift towards the end of the season as we get further and further into season two. Then we've got Dr. McKay going in and talking to Mr. Williams, and he's very concerned, obviously, as someone would be with a tumor, especially that big. And she's talking about that she'll have to go in with a needle, and they'll have to go in and do some surgery and to remove that and open up his brain. And he goes, "You're gonna have to open up my head." Like that's terrible. Like you can tell this actor is brilliant in the way that he is portraying the fear that he is feeling in this episode. It feels very real, and it just you really feel for the person, because I mean a brain tumor is terrifying. Going in and operating on the brain, like it's, as I started to hear that, I'm like, that it would be horrifying, because I don't know how I would react necessarily, but it would probably be up there as one of the ones that would scare me the most. Open heart, brain surgery, like anything like that. That's some scary stuff. He's played by Derek Cecil, and again, he is so good in this episode and the episodes prior. So I'm hoping we get more interactions with McKay and Mr. Williams. I think that it will be a very interesting dynamic as we progress. Sorry, I'm on IMDb and it says doctor. I don't know if did we learn that he was a doctor at some point? But his name's Michael Williams, so they called him Mr. Williams. So I don't know. Next scene is Langdon talking to the Hanson family, and we learn that the older Hanson has a very low blood pressure. And he's like, "Do you typically have really low blood pressure?" And he goes, "No, it's typically really high." And he goes, I took some pills from our house on the table." And Langdon's kind of like, "What?" So like, don't. He goes, "That's a big no-no. Like, you don't take other people's drugs," which is ironic from the person saying that. Um, but I think obviously it's played very well into Langdon having that interaction of like, that's a big no-no, sharing drugs. Meanwhile, he's the one taking the drugs, and now he's on rehab. Now he's back. So that's where we leave that scene. And then we get back to Nancy Yee, and she is outside talking to Dr. Al Hashimi and Robbie. as they continue to make their rounds together and treat patients together. And they start to talk about different options that she has. And she goes, this is when she's really taking in that he might actually be paralyzed for life. And they're like, we're going to do some CT scans. We got to, figure out what's going on with the spine. But yes, like right now, there is some concern that he might actually be paralyzed um, for the foreseeable future, or for the rest of his life. And there's obviously a lot of concern from Nancy. And so she goes back into the room, and Dr. Robbie and Al Hashimi are left outside of the room. As they close the door, Al Hashimi says, that she's going to start to go see other patients, and then they can meet back up. But right now, she's going to kind of break off from him, and they can kind of go their separate ways. And he goes, "Oh, you're already breaking up with me?" And she goes, "Oh, I like." What does she say? I like. What's the line? Hold on, I'm going to rewind it because it just happened. Uh, but yeah, she's like, we'll take another lap. We'll come back here. We'll meet up, and then we'll continue discussing whatever it might be. But yeah, he's he's basically like, oh, we're gonna break up, and she says, hold on, it's coming up here, splitting up so soon. You're free to see other people, Doctor Rabinovich. And he said, or she goes, I'm looking for cooperation, not commitment. Great line. And very flirty. Like, it was pretty flirty between the two of them, I felt. Like, it was met with smiles and kind of some joking, even though you can tell they've got contrasting styles. I just continue to say this. I love, love, love the way that they, uh, portray these 2 characters together, because she is what a lot of people probably would consider an antagonist in this point, the one that kind of goes against our protagonist. But it's not to the point where like we hate Al Hashimi. We just, I think we appreciate the fact that they're 2 different people, 2 different styles in the way that they lead and the way that they practice medicine, and have very different thoughts on, it's very much gut versus brains. And Dr. Robbie goes on his intuitions, and Dr. Al-Hashimi was much more calculated and methodical. And there is a clash of styles, but it's not to the point where other shows would take it, where it's so dramatic that they end up, it's like you hate one character and love the other. It's very much like a mutual respect. They definitely respect each other. They just don't agree. And that's okay. I mean, that's something that I think they do so well in this show, is that it's so grounded in reality, where you don't always have to agree necessarily with the people that you're working with. You just got to come to a common place where you can work together and share your observances. And they're both able to handle Nancy Yee and her husband so very well, because they're able to use each other's strengths. Where Al Hashimi seems to be much better at bedside manner, whereas Robbie is much more reactive to what's happening. And while he is good with people, he is not, I would say he's not as nurturing as Al Hashimi is in this episode. Al Hashimi does a great job of, like, even though she seems like somebody that's kind of cold at first, she does seem to warm up to Miss Yi, because Miss Yi's scared. And Al Hashimi has this very nurturing moment of like, it's gonna be okay, and she kind of hugs her. Whereas Robbie, I don't think would ever do that. Like, he's very at arm's length with you, which is interesting, because typically those dynamics with very black and white with Al Hashimi tends to be a little less affectionate, whereas somebody like Robbie, who goes with his gut and his heart, tends to be more affectionate. But I think because of the things that Robbie has dealt with in the past, he's starting to keep more people at arm's length, whereas Al Hashimi is very comforting and patient oriented, and you really see that come through in their character this year, or sorry, this this episode. We then head to the next scene, which is going to put us back with a character that is so very interesting. And I'm glad that they introduce her, because it gives us another layer to Robbie's character. And he really gets to connect with the patient. Then and we get a different side from him. And this patient is, hold on, sorry, I'm gonna scroll up in my notes because I have it in a, is her name is Yana. And Yana confesses that the 4th of July fireworks, um, and the kids making all sorts of noises, caused her to drop a, um, what is it called? Um, Dang, I'm blanking on samovar. A samovar is a bigger type of container that holds, I think it's tea or coffee. I think it hold both. But she drops it and it shatters, and it's a big metal like tin that holds that, and it, I think it's a tin. Hold on, I'm watching the big metal urn for coffee or tea, and it drops, and the water goes all over that she was boiling up. It goes all over her leg. Dr. Robbie introduces herself or himself as Rabinovich, and Yana goes, "Jewish, huh?" And he's like, "Yep, you got it, you nailed it. I am Jewish." So they're both Jewish. There's that connection. She asked if he's married. I think it's kind of flirty. Like it's kind of like, "You married? You're a good looking guy." And he's like, "No." She goes, "Do you go to synagogue?" And he says, "On high holidays, on the holidays that I guess truly matter for for Jewish folk." And they continue their conversation. He peels back, and there's a gnarly, nasty burn. There's clearly like some kind of liquid on it. He goes, "What did you put on that?" And she said, "Honey." And I think it's I forget which doc's in there, or no, it's what's her name? Priya. I think it's Priya. What is her name? Perla. Um, our nurse Perla is sitting in there with her, and she says, "What'd you put on that?" Or so no, Emma's in with her. Perla's later. Emma goes, "What'd you put on that?" And she said, "Honey." And she goes, "Honey? Why'd you put honey on there?" And Robbie goes, "Actually, honey can have some healing effects, just depending on what kind of honey that you put on there." But he goes, "In this instance, these are some deep burns, and you're going to have to, you're basically gonna extract skin and pull out some of the burn and clean it up." So very painful, looks very painful. It is a massive burn on her leg. And he asks basically like what caused this, and she goes, "Well, the fireworks in the neighborhood, um, they're the ones that kind of scared me, and so that's kind of why I dropped that, and it went all over me." And she says that she went to synagogue, but she went to the Tree of Life, and the Tree of Life was a real event, shooting, where a lone gunman entered a synagogue and opened fire on Jewish worshippers. 11 people were killed during the shooting, and it rocked the Jewish community in Pittsburgh. In the pit, the fictional character Yana survived the shooting, but still has PTSD. And she's telling Robbie about this, and uh, she has this great moment where she's talking about it, and he says, which is one of my favorite lines in this show, where he says that PTSD, there's no real timeline, or like a instance where you're supposed to know when that PTSD goes away. Like there's no point where you're supposed to just know when PTSD is no longer prevalent. And so he goes through this whole episode where he's dealing with his own PTSD, and now he encounters another person who's been through a very traumatic event. And while Robbie is still dealing with the PTSD from last season, you know Yana's confessing to her own PTSD, and that she every time she hears fireworks, she thinks of the gunshots in the synagogue. And um, it's such a cool moment where they connect, because he connects with her on a religious level, on a emotional level, and spiritually. I think that they have a connection where they understand that they've both been through some trauma, and whatever that trauma might be, Yana's confessing it to him, and I think it connects so well because they're similar. They come from similar backgrounds, and I think that that's something that really connects with Robbie, and continues to be something that he will have to struggle with in this season, is the PTSD from last year. And as we know, he's not really been upfront in facing the emotional damage that was caused by the shooting at the Pit Fest last year. And again, we hear people reference that, and I think Dana at one point says that you didn't even take the time to really use the resources that you needed to use. So this was a great moment. I think it speaks to the fact that Yana wants Robbie to realize that there is also her side of things, where PTSD is a real thing, and I think she senses with him that there might be some PTSD from certain things that he's not quite upfront about. We get a really cool moment later on because they kind of revisit that same character, Yana, and I'll just finish it out here because I think it's fitting to not just leave this part. Um, we get an acknowledgement of Perla's Muslim faith because Yana asked her if she's Muslim, and Perla's like, "Yes, I am Muslim," and Yana thanks her for the way that the Muslim community stepped in to support the Jewish community after the Tree of Life shooting, and it's such a powerful moment because there's a part of a scene right before Robbie comes in where Yana doesn't really want the nurses taking care of her, and I think there's even a moment where she looks at Perla because Perla has the headwear on, and there's almost like this moment of like she's looking at her, and you'd almost expect her to say something kind of nasty, but she doesn't. But you can see her kind of taking in who Perla is, and then that next scene is when she asks her if she's Muslim, and in other shows like this, like Muslim, and I mean, you might have a full out argument here, or you're waiting for them to say something awful to each other, but they don't. It's a moment of like these two religions coming together, which is so powerful because oftentimes, I mean, religion has caused so many wars, and there's a lot of people out there that believe they need to put their religion on others, and if you don't believe in the same thing they believe in, there's a lot of uh, conflict there. And in this moment, there could be a lot of conflict, but because Yana is so thankful for the way that the Muslim community cared for the Jewish community after that shooting, you can tell there's a genuine respect and love. And no matter what religion you are, Yana is in that belief that you took care of us in a time of need, and we would take care of you in a time of need. And that's such a cool, humanity story. Like it warms your heart because you don't see that a lot anymore where religions will agree with one another. There's a lot of divide in this world right now, and it was just a cool moment. I thought that was awesome that they were able to write that into the story, and it's just so well done. Robbie's personal connection, Perla's personal connection, and Yana is the actress that plays her is so good in the way that she is kind of busting Robbie's chops, which is great. Revisiting Dr. Santos and Kylie Connors, we start to get some wrap up here. The child has immune thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia. I'm sorry, I got the pronunciation. I'm no doctor. ITP is what the condition is called, shorthand, a condition where low platelet count makes for minor bumps dangerous. So there's clotting in around the blood system, and I'm no doctor, so trying to explain this is funny. Basically, you bruise easy, and so she has a condition where any kind of bump playing soccer, and a young kid, 12, or I think she's 11 or 12, any kid like that, I mean, they're always running up against things or really doing things that just as an adult, man, you'd be all beat up, but like kids, they just kind of keep going. They're little warriors, and that's what she said. That's what her dad's basically said, that that they wrestle and they roughhouse a little bit, but she's also a soccer player. And she goes, "You ever watched little girls play soccer? It's like the Hunger Games." I was like, "That's such an accurate." Watching little kids play anything, it is like the Hunger Games. They don't even worry about where they are on the field. They just kind of go after each other and the ball. It's wild, especially soccer. But the dad kind of jokes that it's like the Hunger Games, and then that's when our social worker Dylan steps in and is asking the father, you know, what what's going on, Benny? Like, your daughter has a lot of bruises. There's ones from way back. There's ones that are relatively fresh. Like, is there something she's doing at home that we need to know about, or something's going on at home that we need to know about? And he's kind of like, "What are you insinuating?" And then that's when Dylan goes, "Okay, let's go down to this room down here. It's quiet, away from people, and I'll ask you some further questions because we gotta see what's going on." He goes, "No, you can ask me right here." And he stops right in the middle of the hallway where everybody could hear him. And he goes, Santos starts to allude to the fact that she believes he might be being, or that Kylie might be abused at home. And that's when Benny starts to lose it and is like, "What the do you mean? What do you mean by that? Like, I'm not abusing my daughter." Uh, Come to find out, he is innocent. And so that reaction makes sense. He's like, "The hell do you mean? I'm not beating my daughter. Like, I'm not that kind of person." Um, and is very, very, I mean, dropping the F bomb. And then Santos is standing there and Dylan's standing there and they're yelling. And all of a sudden, Dana's like, wait, 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 wait. That's when they start to tell them that they have ITP, that the daughter has ITP, and that it's a condition that does cause you to bruise whenever you just bump into the slightest things. So Santos, for the first time that we've seen, really, her conclusion that she jumped to was not correct. That this little girl is not being abused at home. And I think it's a very humbling moment. You kind of see it in Santos where she's, but the other thing too is like it later shows in another scene where Benny's talking to his wife about Kylie, ex-wife, and is they're very good co-parenting at that moment. Um, Benny's very calm, and Santos is doing a great job describing what's happening, and that Kylie will need steroids to try to combat that, and allow for the blood to kind of go through, and that the platelets aren't being attacked internally, and the steroids can help fight that to where she can have a higher platelet count. And Benny takes that really well. He's like, "Thank you, I really appreciate that." And so there's not really a blow up afterwards of like, "You, I can't believe you blame." Not yet. Like it might happen eventually, but he's like, "No, like." And he's like, she goes, She'll need to stay here for 3 days for observation." And then Benny's like, "Yeah, sure. Can we get a room?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'll check for you." Santos says that, and she walks away. But again, it's it's not like somebody comes up to her and tells you, goes, I told you so," which is very realistic. I mean, I think it's always every kid, and that's what Dylan, the social worker, says. Every child that comes in with bruising like this is going to get questioned by social services just to make sure, even if you're not. But I think in that job, especially too as doctors, you would have to assume the worst. So this is a very natural thing. It's not like it was detrimental. It's not like Santos said, "You're an abuser," like, and did something crazy. She was just insinuating, and then come to find out it wasn't right. And right before it gets too heated, Santos doesn't say anything harmful. She doesn't say anything that I think you would be able to get sued for. Um, she was just doing her job, but definitely jumped to the wrong conclusion. But did so with her coworkers, not really to anybody else. And I think so that really sets up Santos to be able to move on from it. Um, but I think internally she's now questioning herself a little bit, which she's always been very confident and hasn't really ever second guessed herself, which can kind of get in the way if you're a physician, and you see that quite a bit where people are so confident and then they start to question themselves, and that's when they start to make mistakes. But throughout the whole episode, there's one more interaction where Santos is sitting at like the nurse's station. I think she's probably just recording her notes from Kylie's visit, and the girlfriend walks away with uh, Benny, and they're arguing, and she's basically like, "I can't believe you would insinuate that I would ever do anything to your daughter, blah blah blah. I can't believe you yelled at me for letting your daughter just be a kid, like running around your house." And he goes, "I don't know what the hell you mean, shut up." Like they get in this huge blow up argument. She goes, "Fine, then I'm leaving," and she leaves. So she's gone. So the wife's probably going to come in. I'm assuming we're going to get more of this story, where maybe the mother comes in. I'm interested to see. I'm assuming that the kid's not being that the ITP is something, but, like, just kinda the anger from the father that you see arguing with the ex-girlfriend. I think Santos is still a little bit on guard. I don't know, it kind of felt like she wasn't quite ready to give up on the fact that maybe this kid, yes, is getting beaten, bruising, but also, like, that's a lot of bruises. I don't know. It just felt like Santos wasn't quite done with this story yet, and neither is Kylie, and I think the mom coming in might add more elements to this, but we shall see. It could be over, but it also felt very much like Santos wasn't quite ready to give up on this yet. So back to Mr. Yi and Nancy, which is a couple in the car crash. They find out that uh, there is a temporary paralysis that happened with Mark Yi. Um, the diagnosis, I'm trying to find if because there's definitely a name for it, but basically the paralysis happens. I think they said from think it's potassium getting into the cells, and it can cause weakness, fainting, and temporary paralysis. I can't find the actual word for it, but oh, there we go. Hypokalemic periodic paralysis, where the potassium can get into the cells and cause weakness, and also temporary paralysis. Doesn't last forever, and you can come out of it within a couple hours. But usually due to high stress situations and um, other health issues. But basically, he's going to be fine. Um, and just as we find out he's fine, that's when we get Nancy Yee collapsing, and Al Hashimi and Robbie are there. They've now made their circle back to Nancy Yee, and she collapses and is out, completely out. And they're like, "What is going on?" So they unbutton her shirt. They're checking for a pulse. They're checking to see what's going on. There's bruising. Robbie notices like on her collarbone, like the seatbelt mark, and he goes, "Oh crap!" So then he unbuttons her shirt more and looks down. I think it's around her spleen, and there's a huge bruise from a seatbelt that shows that it's bleeding internally. And so they're like, "Oh my gosh! Like, how did we miss this? How did we check for him?" And she'd been in the same accident. We didn't at least just check her, like even a physical, like, "Hey, just let us see if there's any marks or bruises on your body." Just to see and make sure, like CT scan, like you just run them through the same process to make sure she's not bleeding internally. But because she presented as okay, just kinda shaken, I think they just assume, which I'm sure this happens quite a bit. I'm obviously not in the ED all the time, but as somebody who's worked at the hospital and somebody who's talked to people in the clinical, I'm sure that this has happened, and it's no fault of anybody's. It's just you're so tunnel vision onto what's really happening right there in front of you, and there's a big time trauma. You're not really thinking about this person who's acting completely normal, and then all of a sudden internally something happened, and then boom. But again, it's typically protocol in an accident to go, "Are you okay? Are you fine? Should we check you out?" And a lot of times they really won't let you they really won't let you leave unless you do get checked. Like they're really like, "I think you should get checked out. I really do think you should." Obviously you can't force somebody to, but they're very adamant about like, "No, maybe we should check you out, make sure nothing's going on." And it's always safe to be on the safe side. I think most people would err of caution there, and would get checked. But again, she doesn't present as anything is wrong. She's very coherent. But she kept talking about the fact that like it was her fault, and that he didn't want to go to this event, and she forced him to go to this event. So they were on their way, and they'd argued all morning about going. He didn't want to go. He was tired from work. They end up going. He ends up driving, and then they get into this accident. So she feels like if he dies, this is my fault. Well, then she collapses. Later on in the episode, he comes to, he's totally fine. He's just recovering in the hospital bed. He goes, "Where's my wife?" And then they explain what happened. And then he's like, "Oh my God, this is all my fault." It's such a great moment of just the way they've written this. Not a great moment like this is happening, but great in the way that they wrote this, because now you're seeing it like she doesn't want her husband to die. She feels like it's his fault. Well, now that she might be the one that might be dying, he's the one like, don't let her die. Like I was awful. I should have just gone to the event. I'm so sorry. He asked Dana to record a video of him, and it's such a nice little video of like, "I can't lose you. I love you. I'm so sorry. Like this is my fault." He's owning up to it. I think he's recording it just in case, like he dies or something. Like I don't know. Like I think he recorded it just so she would have it if she comes back. It's just a crazy thing that you have to think about, losing each other like that, and then both of you having to lose each other, and you almost both die. Um, but yeah, she obviously gets taken in, and they're going to try to figure out if she's okay. They kind of leave it there. I don't think we ever get any. I don't think we get any more word on if she's fine. So I'm assuming that'll pick back up next episode with Nancy. So just a very impactful scene of husband and wife. We see that quite a bit, where death isn't really anybody's fault, right? Like, unless you're purposely hurting somebody, like, death isn't ever anybody's fault. Death happens, right? It does, it has a natural way of happening. And what you do doesn't really impact, like, just because they argued and forced to go to this event, like, hell, he could have been at home and fallen off a ladder. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't predict what's going to happen. I think so many times and it's a thing to do also to really cope with what's going on, and try to accept what is happening. You try to take the blame to make yourself at least feel better about some things, but also like you feel this real guilt, which is not really your fault, like survivor's guilt almost. It's not your fault. Um, And then we get, and again, like every time I think about this, like I heard a bunch of people not really like this episode, but I'm like, that was a really powerful thing happening. This whole Yana situation was very powerful with Robbie. Um, Mel, kind of catching up on other characters. Mel is dealing with the Hanson family, the family where the guy had taken the pill because he wanted to lower his blood pressure and lowered it so much that he felt faint. This is wild to me because this does actually happen. I was now looked it up because I'm like, wait, does this actually happen? So there are a bunch of people out there whose families just share medication, and sharing medications pretty common amongst people that can't really afford to buy a bunch of medication, which is crazy. Because obviously you could have adverse health reactions to all sorts of different things. But Langdon said that the younger guy needed to go home and film. Basically, they called it like a pharmacy table or like a medical medicine table, and they go home, and Mel's on FaceTime, and this person's at home and is filming all the pill bottles at this house where the Hansons are staying, like this rental property. And I'm telling you, there's like a circular table. There are probably 40 to 50 medicine bottles, like pill bottles, all different things. And they're like going through each of the pill bottles to show him what he'd taken because he was like, I don't know what I took. I can't remember. Finally, they get to one and it's like the color of the pill. He recognizes it. He goes, oh, that's the one I took. And she's Mel, Mel, sweet old Mel. Mel's just like, I'm glad I cracked the case. She doesn't really scold them for like sharing medicine. She's just like, oh, we figured it out. Cool. You're basically taking blood pressure medicine. You took way too many doses and you shouldn't be sharing drugs. Um, so yeah, no, let's not do that. We'll get you back to normal. Basically, he'll be fine. She'll get him back to normal, get back to the baseline. Only needs to be there for a couple more hours um, for observance, and then stop taking each other's drugs, essentially. But it was so good. Like Mel is like so excited that she figured this out. It's so funny. But yeah, it's a really good moment. We don't have too much of Mel yet this season, but I feel like it's coming with her deposition still looming. She doesn't mention the deposition at all in this episode, so I guess it's out of sight, out of mind for right now. But I am sure we're going to get some Mel heavy episodes because she's been relatively quiet. Um, Trying to think of Moan has been really quiet. There was a call that she takes throughout one of the episodes. I can't remember I think it was this one where she's talking and um, there's maybe discussion that Moan's leaving for another hospital, which happens a lot. And I could see it. Like there's a lot of characters right now. But Moan's not really had a ton to do in these episodes. Uh, and neither has Dr. Garcia. Although Garcia is more surgical and she's just kind of always in the room. So she does have a lot more to say. But yeah, Moen's kind of taken the raw end of the deal because Ogilvy and Kwan, the med students following around Whitaker, have kind of taken up that airtime, where Moen's not really had a ton to really do in these episodes. So I'm interested to see if maybe she moves on from the hospital as they kind of write her out. But like I said, the most impactful interaction comes with Mr. Williams, going back to Dr. McKay. Again, like when we last left Dr. McKay in that scene I was talking about, Dr. McKay goes into the room and tells him that he has the tumor and he's very paranoid. She goes, is there anybody we can call? They make a call. The next of kin, his emergency contact, who they will typically contact when there's a lot of really bad news like this, just for support. They contact Gretchen, who is on his emergency contact thing, and Dr. Van Horn, I believe it is that this is it's one of our nurses, not Dr. Van. That would be a doctor. One of our nurses comes in and tells McKay that this is his ex-wife, Gretchen. So the emergency contact was his ex-wife, which at first you're like, wait, what? Why would he have this? Maybe they're really close. And then she walks in and she goes, why did you call me? It's my ex-husband. We've been divorced for years. Why did you call me? And he goes, well, he still has you listed on the emergency contact. And I've seen a lot of people online say, like, why would he, like, every time you go to the doctor, you have to update your emergency contact. Either he didn't change it because he's like, who else would care for me? Like, he's very lonely, or maybe he hasn't been to the hospital, like that particular one. Because when you change an emergency contact to your primary care, it's not the ED that's going to have your emergency contact. It's the primary care physician that would. So no matter if he's going to the doctor regularly, the emergency department doesn't have his emergency contact updated. So maybe he came to the emergency department with his ex-wife at some point and then had never changed it, had never gone back to that hospital. So that's how you could explain that. But um, this is a great scene. Dr. McKay is so good. Cassie McKay, Fiona Dourif, I think is how you say her last name. She is one of my favorites in the whole show. But there is such a great moment. She brings in the ex-wife. The ex-wife's like, "Why'd you call me?" Um, and they explain to her that like he's not doing well. Like, this is really bad. And he goes, I guess I never updated the form. I'm so sorry. She goes, no, I guess it's okay. Like, she kind of like, okay, fine, sorry. She goes, they called, and she goes, I was just surprised that they called me. And they both kind of laugh. He's not angry. She's not really angry. She's kind of very nervous. She's twisting around her wedding ring from her current marriage. There's this really great moment. And he's like, I heard you got married. She goes, yeah, I did. And he's like, congratulations. She said, thank you. And he's like, I just want you to be happy. Hope he treats you well. It is such a oh, I got chills. He goes, you deserve to be happy. And it really did. It was like, my gosh, like this is tough because as the audience what's going on. She doesn't. She goes, I'm really sorry. Or she does. She's just found out. She goes, I'm sorry that you're going through this. And he goes, yeah, me too. And he goes, I'm a survivor. You know me. Like, we'll get through this. Well, I'll get through this. McKay says, I'll leave you alone for a little bit so you guys can talk. They talk for a few minutes. She goes to check on a patient, but as she's leaving, um, they kind of have that moment where like, yeah, like let's start, and they start to talk. Uh, but very fascinating. And as the episode starts to come to an end, this is where it was really a cool moment of um Dr. McKay is walking and she runs into Gretchen, the ex-wife. And this one really, I mean, this is such a difficult thing. And this is why I want to leave a little bit of time here at the end of this episode. She goes, I haven't seen him in 4 years. And she's like, oh man, I can't imagine that. And she goes, it must have been crazy. Like, you know, things weren't great at the end. He was a very different person. He had a big temper. When we first got married, he was never like that. And he was a completely different person. He had a huge temper and he was throwing fits at the end. And he goes, that's why we got divorced. And she goes, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then Gretchen goes, could the tumor have been a reason why he was acting that way? And Dr. McKay goes, yeah, it's very likely that it could have been that. And then you just see in Gretchen's face of like, she is thinking about their marriage, the person that she loved, love of her life, and he changes on a dime from what he used to be. And then she just has this moment of when he's kind of normal again, and she's like, now she's realized that this could have caused the anger and the temper. And Gretchen's just like, you can tell there's like this, what do I do? Like, we threw away this marriage for this person that I've loved, and you can tell she still loves him and cares deeply for him, but is currently married to somebody else she loves. Like, this is almost like when you have that person that's in a coma that you move on from because you think they're the end of life, and then they wake up and you're married. And some people wouldn't do that, but some people would, and or people that you thought were gone forever but weren't. And it's just like, boom. What would you do in that situation? Like, obviously, you don't want to divorce the person you're in love with now because now you've built this relationship where you probably love that person just as much. But now you're presented with the fact that like the previous relationship, a lot of it might have had to do with the fact that this person had something wrong with them health wise that was causing all of this, and that he was actually just going through that, and that was it, and that he was that totally normal person you fell in love with before, but it was a tumor that caused all the anger. And you're like, man, like I loved him, and it almost looked like she loved him more. Like this was her first love, her true love. And you know, you don't know much about her marriage now because she never mentions it, but it did kind of feel like that, where she was going over in her head, like, I still love this person so much, and we could have been together had it not been for this. As she's leaving, then she just adds the absolute dagger. She goes, "Hey, has he changed the emergency contact yet?" And Dr. McKay goes, "No, he hasn't been able to change that yet." And she goes, "Can you keep me on it? Don't Even if he asked you to change it, can you just leave me on it?" And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely." It is such a good scene, like, unbelievable. So well acted by these 2. It was so powerful, and you really feel for the guy because he's now gotta go through this treatment where he might not make it, and he's realized this, and she's realized this, and he seems pretty lonely. It just gosh, what a powerful, powerful moment. Kinda segueing from that, we'll catch up on, some other people that are kinda like the side stuff. Currently, Dr. Javadi and Ogilvy were trying to flex their brainiac powers with another patient, talking about medication and basically, "I know better, you know better," and then as they're arguing, the patient's like, "What do you mean? Like, just tell us what you mean. Like, why are you 2 arguing? This makes no sense. Just tell me what my" I think it's her father needs to get better, and they're kinda like, "Oh, sorry, like, our stupid little rift is causing problems with patients." That's the first sign you get of that really becoming a problem. And Dr. Langdon catching up with him. He is with our one of our favorites, Donnie Donahue, who is the nurse, and is about to have a kiddo, bring a kiddo into the world, and, they actually have a patient, it's a young boy that has stuck jewelry beads up both nostrils. As kids do, they stick things up their noses. Plenty of times, I'm sure everyone has had some kind of experience with someone or somebody or their own selves doing that when they were little. But there's 2 beads, so they couldn't really get the 1 bead out by, I think it's called the mother's kiss is what it's called medically, but there's this thing where if you have something in one nostril, if you plug the other nostril and then blow into their mouth, it would push it out, but because it was in both, it doesn't work. So the dad was like, "I tried that and got snot all over my face," because the beads wouldn't come out because they were lodged. They're like, "It's fine, we'll take care of it." He goes, "Is it gonna hurt?" And they're like, "No, we'll numb the pain so he won't feel a thing." And he goes, "Well, you don't know this kid. He's kinda crazy as the kid's climbing the back of the bed, a hospital bed. And like, "Hey, man, you like video games? We got a cool 3D video game for you." And they put like the 3D thing on his head, the virtual reality video game thing. And then they do the thing where they have the little balloon on the end and they are able to get it behind the object and dislodge it. And as they're doing this, Langdon, I will agree with a lot of people on this one. This was kind of a weird moment. He like is quoting some kind of reading that he's done, and it's about fatherhood, and it's a very strange thing. I don't know. It didn't really make sense the way that it like it was meant to be like Langdon giving this fatherly advice to new fathers as he's doing parenthood too, and it's like I don't know. It didn't really connect. I think the way that they wanted it to. It was very kind of confusing. Um, I don't know. It was kind of a weird scene. But anyway, it just shows that I will say one thing it did do. Langdon is very good with kids, and he's very, very good at really connecting to people. And we love Langdon, and he's a good person. He's just gone through some terrible times, and you really just feel for the character who's now fighting his way back from addiction, which is cool to see. And he's given great advice to Mel. He's given great advice to Donnie. Like he's just this very fatherly figure, and he's so much like Noah, or sorry, Noah, Doctor Robbie, Noah Wiley. But he's very much in that same kind of like they think and do so much that remind me of one another, which is hard for Langdon and him not to be in good terms quite yet. Last scene that we get is Dana getting a phone call at the nurse's station, and this is where once again the pit leaves us on an excellent, excellent cliffhanger. The Westbridge Hospital calls over and tells the Pittsburgh Trauma Center that they have a code black. So Westbrook Hospital to explain code black. So I work at a hospital as a comms person. We get code black. I wouldn't call them code black. Like we would get black as far as capacity updates. If you get a code black, it typically means there's something wrong electrically. There's a disaster, or there's something that is causing sometimes capacity in the emergency department or capacity at the hospital. It could be other things too. Basically, what code black will trigger is the most important thing. Code black triggers ambulance being diverted to other hospitals. So Westbridge is in code black. That means no hospitals, or sorry, their hospital will not be taking patients in through the ambulance bay or patients in to see them and admit them. So they're diverting them ambulances to other emergency departments. And so the pit is not at capacity. They're not in code black. They can accept patients. So they're going to get an influx of patients through their trauma center. It's rough because I'm assuming Westbridge Hospital, because it's not called a trauma center, is just a hospital. Whereas a trauma center is usually used for traumatic experiences and things. So trauma centers will take on more difficult cases, more traumatic things that are going on. But if you're now passing off just typical ambulance, like they had a stroke or something, or there's tightness in the chest or something that's not as serious, like a broken arm or something, those are still going to get pushed in through the trauma center. Now you're going to have every hospital in that area going to the pit. Um, so that's not good. That is not good. Dana receives the call and she goes, "Is this a drill?" And then my favorite line of this episode actually is, "It's the 4th of fucking July." I love that line. Dana's like, "You shitting me? Like, this is absolutely insane." Um, and then you can hear Robbie, because Robbie knows just by the tone. Robbie goes, "Oh, I should have left last night." People hated that line. I was like, I love that line. They're like, it was too like sitcom-y. I was like, no, like I'm pretty sure every person in a profession at some point had said, "Man, I should have taken that vacation yesterday," when all the shit hits the fan the next day. So I'm pretty sure everybody said that. And then we get a great little scene where security guard Ahmed uh, sets up a new betting grid for the day. Why did Westbridge close? How long will they be closed? And how many new patients will arrive because of it? Because if you remember, back in season one, the security guard in the ambulance bay and the admission team had basically like a betting going on of like why people were being admitted into the it's such a good callback to last season, and it brings Ahmed, who's a great character as well. I mean, man, they're so good at writing characters in this show. But I love that because it sets up at a very exciting, probably next couple of episodes, because now, because Westbridge is in code black, they're going to get every single case. The ED is going to get to capacity. They're going to have a hard time. They're going to have beds in hospital or beds in the hallways and stuff like that. And the pit doesn't really strike me as that hospital that's going to turn a lot of people away. So I'm sure they're going to try to fight through this because they're a trauma center. So they're going to try to take on as many patients, especially to cover Westbridge while they're in code black and help out the community together. Um, it's going to get wild, and there's too many illusions right now. One illusion that I did catch was as we start to move into predictions for next episode. One thing that kept getting brought up by Louis was, "I don't like fireworks. I'm tired of fireworks." There were a lot of that. Like a lot of that line was like everybody was like, "I'm tired of fireworks. No more fireworks." I'm assuming we're getting fireworks of the literal sense and the figurative sense. So I'm sure that stuff's about to hit the fan. Um, and those are all allusions to what's getting ready to happen. Like I said, predictions. So I kind of go character by character. I think Al Hashimi, Dr. Robbie have more conversations about this patient passport because it's starting to become kind of a problem. You've seen multiple patients now, and if you don't know what the patient passport is or can't remember what it is, it's the guide that Al Hashimi says that we need to give out when patients come into the ED in order to give them an idea as to what their journey is through the ED, how long it'll take to get these certain tests. It's brought up, I think, to Santos or McKay. I can't remember exactly who it is that they bring it up to, but basically it was Dr. McKay, because it was when she was dealing with the older patient, Mr. Montrose. He goes, "Hey, this is only supposed to take an hour," and she goes, "Well, that's patient passport needs a holiday edition because we're jam packed on holidays." That patient passport, I get it, and I know why hospitals do it. It allows some clarity and some communication between hospital and patient, because a lot of times when you go to a hospital, you're just waiting around wondering what's next. The patient passport is a guide. It is not a this is exactly what's going to happen, but it is a guide so you can help to better understand what your process might be. Obviously, wait times are going to depend on how many patients are actually in the hospital. But if you're reading that as a patient, you're like, "Oh, in and out in an hour, great." And then you're in the ED for 3 hours, you're going to be pissed. Um, it's the one thing about, it's nice to be able to communicate that, and it does have its advantages. Also has its disadvantages as well, and you get a lot of patient dissatisfaction from trying to tell people this is how long they're wait, and then they wait longer, and then they're not happy about that. So I'm sure the patient passport thing is going to come up. I'm sure that the way Al Hashimi deals with her patients comes up, and the way that Robbie deals with it comes up. Like I'm sure there's a clash coming. I just can't picture of who that might be with at this moment as far as patients are concerned. Maybe it's Miss Yi, because of how much Al Hashimi seemed to have cared about Yi. So I don't know. There's definitely some kind of big conflict that's going to happen between the two because right now all's going too well. And by big conflict, I mean this show is really good about balancing conflict and big conflict without being overly dramatic about these relationships. So interested to see what they do there. Dr. McKay with Mr. Williams. I'm sure we get more there because that is such a great um, dynamic, the two of them. So I'm excited to see if there's any more progression with that story. The security guard, obviously, I think we're building up to the fact that he is racist. Uh, by the end of the episode, I think it's insinuated because I forgot to mention that the cops come in to see and get a statement from the security guard. And while the security guard's talking, he's like, "So basically, you shot this taser into this kid for no reason. He's not on drugs or anything. So this kid's probably just acting normal. You just shot him for the hell of it with your taser. Now we've got questions for you because this changes things. So now the security guard's in trouble for having tased this kid that's probably just walking through the library that he could have said something that the security guard didn't like, or just the way that he looked, didn't like the way he looked, racist, buzzed him. And then this kid goes into a manic phase because he's been tased. And those things go like into your skin. I'm like, oh, those are gross. I was like, I didn't know that. But anyway, that's something that's going to come to a head. Obviously, I think we find out that that guy's racist. He'll get charged. The kid will come to and have that conversation about that. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the kid has to say once he comes to and is settled down after getting the tase removed. What else? Langdon. I'm sure there's a Robbie moment coming, but again, like I said last episode, I think it's probably later in the season. I don't see them mending that fence just yet. Uh, what else? Mel, again, we don't have much there. I'm sure the deposition gets brought back up next episode because we went a whole episode without talking about it. Santos, again, it just doesn't feel like she's done with Kylie and her patient. Like I feel like there's just still some more stuff there that they're going to get into when the wife arrives. I'm sure the wife and the ex-husband have a conflict that happens or something. I just feel like that story is not quite finished yet. Who else? Dana and Emma, I think they continue to make their rounds. I think we're done with Big B. I think we're done with, some of the stuff that they're doing. Louis, I just assume something bad's going to happen to Louis. Um, every time they go in there, like they go into like they show them putting stuff in, and then they show it's clear. I'm assuming like the last one or something is going to cause like there's blood in it or something where they're going to have to go in and do something with Louis. I just don't have a good feeling about that this year. I feel like that'll be a pretty big death if that happened, and that might be what they're setting us up for, or at least a scare. Who else? Javadi and Ogilvy, like that's just not really an interesting storyline for me as much. I think it's the one part where I just feel like they're running out of stuff to do with Javadi. Um, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure her mom will step back in at some point, but I just feel like the whole Brainiac thing, I mean, you can only do that for so many episodes before it just becomes stale. I just don't know where they push that. Like, obviously, it's going to cause a problem somewhere, maybe with a patient, but right now, I'm just not digging that one. Um, who else? Moen, I really do. I'm starting to think that she might be leaving the show. I just got this weird feeling that she might be gone as they start to try to make more room for Ogilvy and Kwan. Uh, Whitaker, we don't get too much from him this episode either, but I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of falling out where he does something wrong with the med students and then Robbie has to step back in, or Langdon to correct a problem, or something's coming with Whitaker. I feel like everything's gone too perfectly for him, and he's just a second year, I think, resident. So I just assume something is happening that we're not quite aware of yet. Who else? Donnie, I don't know if we get my like. I started to think maybe something happens like with Donnie's kid that's getting ready to be born, but maybe I'm overthinking that one. There's a lot of emphasis on him being a father soon, which is kind of interesting. But Other than that, the last thing would be the code black. I'm sure that we're going to get overflow in the hospital. I'm sure it's going to get crazy busy. And then that's when the real fireworks will start. Like crazy stuff's going to happen. So looking forward to seeing how what new patients come in. And our ASL sign language person is definitely getting ready to head back into the pit, which I'm really fascinated to see. Like she didn't look like she was in pain when they were talking to her out in the waiting room. So I think that's it. I think we're gonna get some collusion on Nancy Yee, see if she lives, but doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of other things going on worth mentioning. And I think that's gonna wrap up our episode. Overall, a fantastic episode. Once again, I actually like this episode a lot. I know some people didn't care for it as much as 1 and 2, but I thought this was a solid episode with some really great personal interactions with patients. A lot of patient interactions in this episode, a lot less of our characters really talking to one another that are a main staple in this show, which is always a lot of fun, just because it is a lot about the patients and not about doctors talking to one another. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to do it. Our next episode is coming out on January 29th, and we will be back to recap that next Sunday. I record these on Sunday, and I try to drop them on Sunday evening. And so you can listen to them on your way to work on Monday or throughout the evening on Sunday or throughout the week leading up to that next episode. But I really enjoyed season 2 so far. I think it's done such a nice job of continuing the magic that really got us into loving season 1 and the pit. So I'm looking forward to seeing where they go from here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're over on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, helps people find us, helps people find the show. Share the channel so that people can find us. We love to grow this community. If you're on the audio version, rate and like. You can share it as well. We're on Spotify and Apple, and I think everywhere you can get podcasts now. We are now available. So make sure to head over there and give us 5 stars. It really helps people find the show, or just rate us. Let us know what your thoughts are. Give us some little criticisms if you got any criticisms. But looking forward to breaking down the next episode of The Pit, which will be season 2, episode 4, and that will be 10 a.m. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.